Alright, so let's get started making our Pong game with a blank canvas. First thing I want to do is add a backdrop so that everyone understands how things move around the stage. So we'll go around to backdrop, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and add my XY grid. So that gives us a nice way to see how the coordinate grid works on our stage. Next, we're going to add our sprites. We need a ball, 2 paddles, and 2 goal lines. So first we'll add our ball. And select, and now we have a ball. We could search for a paddle the same way, but instead I'm going to draw it. It's easy to draw with a simple rectangle. And we can see how it comes up on the stage. If I don't like it, then I can change it a little bit. And I could change colors. And I can make it a gradient with 2 colors. So now I'm going to move that to this side of the screen. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to name it Player 1. Player 1. Now I need a Player 2. And to do that, I can just right-click and duplicate. And just make sure I take the 1 out of that name. And then I can change the color. Now I have Player 1 and Player 2. Now we need to add goal lines. We could do that by searching for a line. You could also draw one if you want. But I want to add this one to show you that sometimes it doesn't come out the right way. First I'm going to change this to Player 1 goal. And next, see where this direction is. Instead of 90 degrees, I could change it to 0. So what we do now is move Player 1 goal behind Player 2. And then we're going to duplicate that. Only make sure we name it Player 2. So now we have our goals and our paddles and our ball. So now let's set the ball in the center and get it moving. Let's click on the ball. And the first thing we're going to do is drag out a when green flag is clicked, and that will start off our program. We're going to write a small script to get moving. First, go to motion, and we want to bring the ball to the center of the screen, X0, Y0. Now we're going to take out 2 control blocks. We're going to take out a wait, because we want to wait before we get moving to give players ready to get set up. So now we're going to go back to motion, and inside our forever loop, we'll say move 10 steps, and if on edge, bounce. And let's test that out. Notice it's going right through the paddles, but it's doing exactly what we want it to do. So now what we want is to get the ball bouncing off the paddles as well. So now we're going to start using our conditional statements. And we use a lot of these for this program, or for this game. And the one we use is if-then. Here's what we're going to say. Now remember, this code is on the ball, so we're going to say if, and then we're going to go to sensing, and we'll move out, not touching the mouse pointer, if touching Player 1, then do what? We'll turn 180 degrees, right? And we want to do the same thing if it touches Player 2. So what we do is we take out an operator that has an or in it. And now I put 1 on one side, duplicate that 1, change player 1 to player 2. So now, if touching player 1 or player 2, turn 180 degrees. So let's try that out. And now you see it's bouncing off both, but the game is a little boring because you don't have to move. So here's how we're going to fix that. First, let's stop it. And instead of turning 180 degrees, we're going to pick a random number, a little less than 180, we'll say 160 degrees, and a little more than 180, 200 degrees. So now the ball will either bounce a little up or a little down randomly. We're not sure. And there you have it. So now that we have the ball bouncing off the edges and bouncing off the paddles, we need to get the paddles to move. So we're going to write code for player 1, so make sure you click on player 1. And now we're going to take out our event when green flag is clicked, move over to control, take out our forever loop, and take out our conditional statement if then. What we're going to say is, if the up arrow is pressed, then move our character up, and we're going to use the y-axis to move it up. So we move over to sensing, and we choose key is pressed, up arrow. And then we move over to motion, and we change y by 10. And now we could click on this conditional statement, duplicate it, put it right in, but change the up to down, and change the y to -10. So now we can move up and down. Next, we have to get player 2 moving. Now we do that very simply. We can drag this whole piece of code over to player 2. When you see it wiggle like that, now if I click on player 2, there it is. I just duplicated it over to a new sprite. But I need to change up arrow to a different key so that 2 players can play. So now W will allow player 2 to move up, and X will allow player 2 to move down. So now the players can move independently. Okay, so now that that is set, you're ready to make a variable so that you can keep score. First, let's click on the ball because most of our code is on the ball. Now, let's make our variables to keep track of our score. Click on variable and make variable. Keep it simple, player 1, and make one for player 2. Okay, now you see I have player 1 and player 2, and they also show up right here. Now if I uncheck it, it'll go away, but it'll still keep track. So now, let's code the ball to increase every time it touches the line. So, we're going to take out if-then statement and put it right underneath. And what we're going to say is, if the ball touches not the mouse pointer, but the goal line for player 1, now we go over to variables and change it by 1. Now remember, I put player 1 goal line here, and this is player 1. So if it touches the goal, he'll score a point here. We'll do the same thing for player 2. Duplicate that condition and change a couple of things. Player 2, player 2. Now let's look at what's happening. It scores more than 1 point, and it never resets. So how do we fix that? First, let's show you how to reset the score. Bring out set variable to 0. Make sure you set player 1, player 2, and that's the first thing that will happen. So now, every time I hit the green flag, they will reset. Now we'll get the ball to only score 1 point, and we'll also get it to reset in the center of the stage after each point is scored. So we just have to add a couple more blocks to our condition. After we touch the ball and score a point, we want to hide the ball. So we go over to looks, and we will hide the ball. Then we want to move it to the center. So it seems like the ball will disappear, and it will reappear in the center of the stage. So we hide it, we move it to x0, y0, then we're going to show it, and then we're going to wait a second for the players to get ready. So we'll go back to looks, we'll say, now we'll show it, and then very important, or else the game will be very difficult, move over to control, and pull out a wait. And the same thing, we can duplicate that piece of code, put it right in our other condition. So now that your variables are keeping track of your score and your ball is resetting after each point, we just have to declare a winner. So first thing we're going to do is make a new sprite that says player 1 wins. Come down over to paint, only this time we're going to choose text. Player 1 wins. And we can make that a little larger. And set it in our screen. Now we're just going to write a simple little script that will hide it and show it when we get to a certain score. So, when green flag is clicked, again we're going to continue to look for a certain condition. Pull out our forever loop and pull out our condition. Notice I didn't attach it yet. So the first thing we're going to do is hide it. And we're going to show it after a condition is met. We're going to go to operator, and we're going to pull out an equals. And what do we want to play to? We'll play to 5. And now we go over to our variables and say, if player 1 equals 5, then show the sprite. We could also move over to control and stop all because the game is over. Next, we just have to do the same thing for player 2. So we're going to make a new sprite. We're just going to rename this sprite instead of sprite 1, player 1 wins. And now we're going to duplicate it. But we're going to change a few things. We're going to say player 2 wins, and we'll change that 1 to a 2. And now we just need to go to our code and change our variables from player 1 to player 2. And you are ready to play, and let's see who's going to win. Looks like player 2. And that's it. Game over.